Hi, I'm Robert Young Pelton. I'm an author, a filmmaker, mostly known for my coverage of conflict. And I'd like to kick off what I want to be a series of interviews that I do with people that I admire and fascinated by, or at least think that you should get to meet. My first one is going to be with CIA legend Enrique Prado. Now, I met Rick through a longtime friend named Billy Waugh. And Billy Waugh is, again, another legend that worked for the CIA, tracked bin Laden, was in Afghanistan at a very advanced age. And we got to know each other when I wrote my book, License to Kill, which is a book about contractors and the CIA and paramilitaries. And he is very close friends with a gentleman named Enrique Prado. And Billy always suggested that I should contact him or talk to him. And I think both Rick and I knew about each other through our travels and our work. But Enrique, in his 70s now, or Rick as he likes to be called, decided to sit down and write a book. And it's tough to write a book, but it's definitely worth a read. So this is his book. And in this book, he details his life with the CIA, his time with the Contras, his time growing up in Miami, and the creation of a kill team, which once again, we'll get into it when you see the interview. But I've spent the last 5 years tracking various kill teams, and they are sort of outgrowths of this original idea that was created in the CIA and then moved over to Blackwater and then moved over to the United Arab Emirates. And I know some of these people personally, so it's not a surprise to me. But one of the funny things is when I first saw Enrique's book, I looked at the bottom and I thought, oh, that's a terrible knife. So the way I met Rick was I sent him a knife that I had designed for Billy Waugh. And this is the knife. And it's a reimagining of what Billy Waugh wished he had when he was in the jungles of Laos and Cambodia during the Vietnam era. So we met on a humorous note. It took a while, but Rick invited me to his beautiful home in Florida, and we sat down, and like I usually do, is I usually spend the day just talking off camera. And then when we sat down, it was a long interview. We had a lot to talk about, and a lot of things that you won't hear about in his book. Amongst them, a controversial book written by a gentleman named Evan Wright, who insisted when Prado first came out, basically, retired and came out in public life, that Ric Prado was an assassin, was a hired gun, a murderer in Miami. And this always baffled me because Ric Prado, yes, he worked for our government in areas that require these type of things, but he's not a criminal. So when I reached out to Evan Wright to get his insight, now I had met Evan Wright at an event at Blackwater called Mirror Image, in which I was teaching people how to be a terrorist. When I say people, I mean people from the military, intelligence, and Homeland Defense. And Evan Wright was there. At the time, he was writing an article. He'd written a fantastic book about Marines in Iraq. And so I reached out to Evan, and he had reached out and posted about Rick being this assassin in Miami, according to a mobster. And within a week, Evan Wright killed himself. So I don't think it was related to what I was inquiring about, but it kind of dead-ended there. So when I sat down with Billy, you'll see our conversation about this book. So I sat down with Rick and talked about this book, which bothers him a lot because it's still out there as an ebook, but it's hard to refute a dead author's assertion. So he defends himself. And the other thing is we talk about this idea of a find, fix, and finish component, which was created inside the CIA as a proof of concept and then expanded under Blackwater and then taken out of Blackwater and then basically moved to the UAE, where a number of people to this day still function as a find, fix, and finish operation around the world. And we'll talk about more of that type of thing later on. But anyways, welcome to this podcast, and please meet Enrique Prado.
Yeah, no, I had the idyllic childhood. My family was middle class. My dad had a '57 Pontiac in 1959. So I lived in a small town called Nicaragua in the central province of Las Villas. And the problem was the Escambray Mountains were right behind that. And that's where Che Guevara was at. So they would run raids into the town. And that's the first time I saw a firefight close up and people actually getting shot.
So you're a little kid. You're seeing men with guns. Does this excite you? Does it scare you? How do you perceive this thing?
It's funny. I think we're all wired in our own ways. When one of the incidents that happened, my parents were out of town, and I was with a nanny, and there was a firefight. So I went up to the front of the window, and I remember opening up these glass jealousy windows, and I'm watching, people shooting at each other, and all of a sudden, what I didn't notice that under the parapet was a guy with an automatic rifle. And all of a sudden he pops up and lets off a whole round, a whole mag of that. And so that was the first time I got tunnel vision and auditory exclusion, both at the same time, man.
So you're a little kid. When did you first realize that there was a revolution or something major going on?
Yeah, I think that was kind of the climax of it. Shortly thereafter, my dad's distant cousin, was one of the rebels. And he snuck into our house at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to tell my dad that he would allow me to leave, but that they could not leave. So my first lesson in counterintelligence. So because they could not leave because they knew they were cousins and it would tip off the hands if something was going on. And I think the highlight of that visit was that he had a Thompson submachine gun and he put it on my lap. That was it. I've hooked on guns since then, so.
Okay, so when we're children, we're scarred by things. There's certain things that put markers on us. At that point, was you afraid for your parents and your future, or were you just a kid thinking, this is crazy stuff?
No, my dad was a cowboy before he started his coffee roasting company, and my mom domesticated him a little bit. So I was brought up, to be the little man, that kind of stuff. So my dad explained everything to me very early on. So we knew the revolution was starting, but remember at the beginning, most people thought the revolution was going to be a good thing. That changed, shortly thereafter. I think seeing some of the violence that I saw early on, and people hanging from trees in Havana, when we were on our way to Havana, I think that's something that stays with you. But yeah, I was aware, but I was always stoic about it because my father was the bastion of my strength, and he would always talk me through things, and so I don't remember being afraid per se. So
you had to leave your family though, right?
Yeah.
Tell me how that happened.
Well, my dad had a coffee roasting company, a nice house, a '57 Pontiac, and what people don't realize is that when you apply to leave Cuba back then, they confiscated everything that you had. And when you're about to leave, they take another inventory, and if anything is missing, you ain't leaving. So because my dad had all these things, they were fighting over, like the chief of the police wanted the car and this kind of crap. So my parents couldn't get out, but so they got me out through a Catholic church program called Peter Pan program. That program brought out 14,000 Cuban kids to the United States without their parents. I was 10 years old when I left Cuba, and that's a scar. Watching my mom
What's that
cry.
like getting on that plane?
It's funny. I don't remember. I remember my mom crying so badly, and me looking at my dad and my dad told me this after the fact because I didn't remember. He said, "If my mom doesn't stop crying, I ain't going." So he knelt down, put his hand on my shoulder, and says, "I promise you, I will see you again." That to me was gospel, and that was the 42. But once you get past that glass fishbowl that they have there, once they checked my stuff, I remember them checking my bag. After that, I don't remember getting on the plane. I don't remember where I sat on the plane. I don't remember landing in Miami. The only thing I remember is when I came through the doors, there was a priest there, and he's the one that took me to first to a camp in Florida City, and about 2-3 weeks later, I was sent up to a Catholic orphanage in Pueblo, Colorado, and that was another scar. I learned to deal with violence really early because I got my ass kicked like the second day that I was there. They asked me if I like Mexicans, and I happened to know two words, yes and no, and I picked the wrong one. Later on, I befriended the Mexicans, and that got evened out. But so there was a quite a quick. You're on your own. You got to take care of yourself. Don't take crap from people. If not, they'll push you around. So I think that was a forging moment. At the same time, it was a Catholic institution, so the object of faith and everything else was also, that was the positive part of the orphanage. But you have 3 or 4 different cultures, 2 or 3 different languages, and a lot of pissed off kids because nobody likes being an orphan.
Right.
So
you learned how to fight, right? There's a pecking order,
yeah.
kind of Lord of the Flies. Now, how did you fit on that pecking order?
I learned to make friends. Make sure that I wasn't the Lone Ranger. Yeah. So yeah.
So a lot of kids, they go to these kind of places and they became hard and tough. And did you keep up hope and sort of do your schoolwork and be a good kid?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it did me a lot of favors. The main thing that they taught me was English. I had for the 9 months that I was there, it was English 101 every single day. So when I came down, my parents finally got out, and I was able to go to Miami. I was actually able to help them get on a bus and go somewhere. So that was a big deal. I've always liked reading. I started reading very early. My mom loved to read, and I was a good kid until probably late high school. Then I started hanging around with the wrong crowd, and in the wrong crowd. Then it's not the same as the wrong crowd now. Okay, we weren't doing, drug shootouts, or it was mainly, kids who think they're tough going against other group of kids who think they're tough.
Where are you living? What's the neighborhood like?
Yeah. Actually, the home life was idyllic. I mean, my father, after about 3 years after moving here, bought his first little house in Hialeah. I started my first year at Hialeah High, then went to Miami Springs, which is where I met half these guys. And I started martial arts when I was 15, so we're talking 1965 or 6.
It's pretty early for martial
arts. Yeah. It was. I loved it. It was just.
Where did you get your influence for martial arts?
There was a guy that my dad worked with who had been a military guy. He was the bodyguard of this very rich guy that my dad was working for, rebuilding his boat. And he gave me a book about judo. And he would show me some things, and that just got my interest going. And then, like I said, as soon as I got a little job and I could afford to join a dojo, I did. I think that there is a certain amount of, again, being wired and then being, your metal gets forged by these experiences. First the revolution, then the orphanage. Little by little, that metal gets a little harder and more of a sword kind of thing.
What did people think about Cubans back then?
At the very beginning, it was very bad. I mean, I actually have photographs of signs that said "No Cubans allowed" or "Cubans go home" and all this kind of stuff. You got to realize Miami back then was a town. That closed after the tourist season ended. Pretty much everything, the hotels were closed and everything else. So. Yeah, I was. I always had decent grades. I wasn't an A student, but I always had this B average kind of stuff. My conduct was what was a little bit of an issue because I was always getting in fights. Because there were Cuban kids and there were American kids and there were black kids coming into the neighborhood. So that mix was quite explosive at times. People get riled up. But I loved school. I never, I wasn't the kind to go skipping school. Some of them were bad or ended up being bad kids. Back then they were just tough kids thinking that they were bad, but some of them did become cops, the other becomes criminals. And several of them didn't make it past to adulthood. It was, I started going and working out and lifting weights at a gym, and that's where a lot of these guys were at. And
which gym did you go to?
It was a gym literally a few doors down, and it was in Hialeah, and it was just a few doors down from the dojo where I was taking karate and jiu-jitsu, Japanese jiu-jitsu. And that's where I met these kind of guys, and they had their, hey, invite you over, you're at a party, somebody starts a fight, and you chime in. That was about the extent of it, but it was, it was a rough crowd. Yeah, I think Evan's book, as you know, his source was a guy who was dying of cancer, I believe, and he was in the drug business. He was in jail, and what he was trying to, what was explained to me by lawyers, that they found out is that he was trying to set up his wife because he knew that he was dying, had cancer, and was in jail. So all of that is fabrication. Now there's characters in there that I knew. That's true. I mean, these are people that I knew. But murders and transporting cocaine and all this other stuff that he comes in there, none of that is true or justified. And as a matter of fact, there was a lot of prominent people in Miami who were mentioned in that book. And they made a cabal, and they actually hired some heavy-duty lawyers and forced them to shut it down. They said, we are going to sue you, and we got plenty of money to do so. There was some Italian kids that used to hang out with us at a place called the Climax, which was a disco. And these kids, their parents, their fathers were real mafia guys, but they wanted to be tough guys, but they really weren't. You know, they were not tough kids. Their parents, their dads were, but you know, and they loved hanging out with us because if there was a fight, they knew that we would step in and help out. And that's where that whole Mayor Lansky thing spin. Did I know, Gary and so? Yeah, from the Climax. But no. And this guy, by the way, I never met him, never set eyes on him. And my friends that I have asked, they said, you two were never in the same zip code. No, I think we were equals in that sense. We both were in the same.
You should go back and just tell me his name. Sorry.
Yeah, Felipe Vidal. I met him when I was 17. He was 16, and it was in a fraternity we call the Crowns, and that was our group, and we became friends. We hit it off very early on. He was always a crafty guy. I think we learned from each other. He was a boxer. I was a martial artist. We would spar. I would kick him. That kind of stuff. So it was. But he always had a mean streak. He had a very bad childhood history with his father getting assassinated and stuff. But we stayed in touch for many years, but on and off, because half the time, I went to pararescue for several years. Then I came out, joined the fire department for 6 years, and left again and never came back. So,
one of the interesting things that Rick and I talk about is his childhood friend, whose name is Felipe Vidal. Vidal also came from Cuba, but his father's quite famous. His father was brought over to be part of a government in exile when the Operation 40 people run by Richard Nixon were plotting and scheming to oust Castro and take over Cuba. So Rick and Felipe became very good friends. And Felipe did get into trouble in Miami when they hung out at the gym, and he was older than Rick. And Felipe features very prominently in Iran-Contra investigations. And as you'll hear Rick talk about, he managed or ran Felipe, who did the logistics at the ranch. And if you know anything about Iran-Contra, if you know anything about Oliver North and how the NSC took over the CIA operation when it was stopped by Congress, it's a fascinating story. And Felipe Vidal actually creates the nexus between all of the flights coming in with weapons and all of the smuggling and the sort of Miami underworld. And John Kerry was digging into this, and Felipe disappeared. Sometimes around 1991, and I've tracked him, I've researched him, but he would be literally one of the most fascinating interviews. His life story is incredible. His work for the Mossad, his work in Kurdistan, when he worked on the kill team, when he moved over to the UAE. I've talked to various people that have worked with Felipe. And Felipe, by the way, is known as Luden Castillo. He's had three sort of personas. I think Max Vargas was one of the Iran-Contra era nicknames. And at that time, all the CIA guys basically liked to use the word Max as their alias. So it was kind of funny. But Felipe, if you're watching this, I would love to sit down and go over your life and let you tell your story. He did write a book. So Felipe was a patron of the arts. He's a very sophisticated gentleman, and he wrote a fascinating book under an alias, and it's in French. I haven't found one in English, but it's worth a read if you want to translate it, if you know French. And I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot to be learned from people like Ric Prado and Felipe Vidal that explain a lot of things that the media never covered. So I'll leave it at that and enjoy the interview.
No, I mean, by that time we were starting to become a majority in Miami, and I think the things balanced out. I think that the early Cubans that came out made a lot of great contributions to the city. So I think that the level of respect of that arose. Yeah, I can't think of any real negative stuff. They were starting to get into politics. You know, Cubans were starting to get reestablished as doctors and stuff like that. And I think
the cocaine trade, right?
yeah, well, but you know, the original cocaine trade was the Colombians.
Right.
You know, they brought that in, and of course there was a criminal element of in any culture. You know, most Italians are really good people, but there is such a thing as a mafia, right? No, that was a Colombian gig, and eventually the competition started because the Cubans that were criminals started getting jealous of how good these guys were doing, and well, there's 10 of you, but we got 100. So that began a lot of firefights. Like I told you, I read a lot, and I grew up on James Bond movies, and not movies, the books. And movies were much later on. So I always had that adventurous spirit, and the fact that the life that I had lived up to then was kind of adventurous to begin with, even though it was forced upon me. So I had, you know, and I did think I was a tough kid. You know, I was in college, first year of Miami-Dade Junior College, and this is the hippie years. They were going to take down the American flag and burn it. And I said, no, they're not. So I called a couple of my homies, Felipe for one, and we stopped them from burning the flag, let's put it that way. But that was a tipping point for me because it was the first time that I was proud of having done violence. I did it for the right reasons.
And when you say violent, you're talking about
Just
punching.
just punch the crap out of it.
So,
Yeah, there's no guns and knives and you know, grenades or like stuff that they do now.
well,
No, I mean, I always dreamt of being something. I was fascinated with scuba. I started scuba diving when I was in high school. So, you know, I wax and wane between trying to be a spy, a military guy, and, you know, be on the Calypso with Jacques Cousteau, you know. All that stuff was there. Those were the competing, and Pararescue brought them all together because, you know, I did go through Navy underwater swimmer school, and that's one of the many things Pararescue does. Pararescue is part of the Air Force Special Operations, SOCOM based, Special Operations Command based. That didn't exist back then, but that's what it is. And our job was to go behind enemy lines to extricate down pilots or a special forces team that had gone out there and gotten, you know, circled or that were wounded. We're primary combat medics. Our schools are scuba school, jump school, mountain climbing school, survival school, SEER school, all this kind of stuff. So that was the main mission. A side mission of it was the capsule recovery. I was never part of that, but that was part of the pararescue mission. Well, there was, and as a matter of fact, that was what started looking elsewhere. You know, I looked at federal marshals. I talked to them. I took the test with the Secret Service. I applied to the agency. The first time was around 74. They told me we're firing, not hiring. You know, this is a post-Vietnam attrition. But in 80, I raced it again, and now I had 6 years of paramedic on the ground in Miami, besides my paramilitary skills from pararescue. By then, I was with the 20th Special Forces National Guard. I never went through the Q course, by the way. I got recruited by the agency before I did. Well, I mean, this was the reserves, like everything else, but yeah, I did more training. I did a lot of training in pararescue because being a reserve unit, there was more pilots than PJs. And so they were always calling us. And I was in the fire department, so I had 2 days off every third day. And so I got a lot of jumps and all that other stuff, but I couldn't go to any other schools. I've gone through all of them, except German ski school and Arctic survival. So that's why I went to the Army. Yeah. I was a full-time. EMT paramedic with the fire department. I was firefighter also. Fought fires. So yeah, that was a full-time job for 6 years. Well, like I said, I wrote in a second time, and this time they saw my creds. Not only was I a PJ pararescueman, but now I had all this experience on the ground, and they said we need combat medics to work with our Special Activities Division, especially Ground Branch, which is the CIA Special Forces, for lack of a better word. I mean, I was aware of Reagan, and my mom was a very big fan of Ronald Reagan, but I wasn't focused on, the big picture of politics. But what happened was I did start working for the agency on contract. I would take leave from the fire department. I would go out there. I would train with the SAD guys, and I made a good influence on them because I could dance with them, And when Reagan declared war on communism in Latin America and started what became the Contra program, going after the communist Sandinistas, the CIA at the time did not have a paramilitary guy with native Spanish background.
Right.
And that's when they looked me up, and like they say, the rest is history.
Are you itching to get in, or you have no idea this is going? Okay, so
I mean, I started on contract in the hopes that it would lead into something full time. But I think that if it hadn't been for the Contra stuff, I'll probably still be working contract. And it was fate and that door opening, Yeah, again, the adventurous spirit takes over. I don't remember being even nervous, but I got that phone call on a Thursday, and I was at headquarters on a Monday. And not even 10 days later, I was on an airplane to Honduras. No training, in alias. I was there as Major Alex Mendez. And when I showed up, my boss said, your job is to live in the camps Monday through Friday. And I did that for over 3 years. Slept in the jungle hammock for 3 years. And when I first got there, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, these kids were starving. Most of them were barely clothed. They had old rifles and everything else. And fast forward the 3.5 years, these guys were a fully armed and viable fighting force. Yeah, with the Sandinistas had deposed Somoza, who was a very crooked individual, but they were fully aligned with communism. Their pipeline was Cuba, Soviet Union via Cuba. Let's put it that way. So Honduras became an ally in fighting the Sandinistas because they were trying to infiltrate their guys also into Honduras. So Honduras took that very personal. So that was one of our base of operations, and they gave us full support. We brought helicopters in eventually. We would hire their pilots to do the support, to keep our numbers down, because you got to understand, it was a black op. It was a black op thing, and hiding the American hand was paramount. That's why they needed me. For the first 14 months on the program, I was the only CIA officer going to the camps because I had the plausible denial. After that grew. The Hondurans were wonderful. The other front that we had was the Mosquitos, which is in the east coast of both Honduras and Nicaragua. There are Native Americans, heavily mixed with black slaves that washed ashore during the years. They're natural hunters, they're natural fighters, and I fell in love with them for several reasons. And I think the biggest reason was, in introspection, was with the regular Contras, they were Spanish. As a matter of fact, Mosquitos called them Spaniards. And there was no culture shock there. But now I'm in the Mosquito with an interpreter, and they're speaking this talakalipalakbanga that I didn't understand a word of. And so that whole, it was just very romantic. It was like going back to my Edgar Rice Burroughs reading days where, here I am out there in the bush. No, you figure I'm a GS-10, made 11 before I left kind of thing. And when you're living in the camps 5 days out of the week and you come out on the weekends, you're not going to be catching up with the news. I mean, to me, world events at the time were a blur. You know, I lived in my own little microcosm.
And were you winning? Were you losing? Were you
No, we were definitely winning. I mean, the once we were able to start these guys trained, and like I said, for the first 14 months, I was the only person going out there and training them. Mm-hmm. So even stuff that I didn't know, like headspace and timing on 50 cal, mm-hmm. I would learn it from people that knew what they were doing, and then I would go and teach it. Mm-hmm. So very shortly thereafter, you know, within less than 2 years, we had a real viable fighting force there. Yeah, Costa Rica, there was it's the opposite side of the coin. The Costa Ricans were actually against the Contras. Mm-hmm. Not for any ideological reasons, but primarily because they were afraid of the Sandinistas. They were afraid to bring on the ire of the Sandinistas. Mm-hmm. So they were not cooperative, and they were actually hostile. Any of our Contra guys who were coming out there for medical and everything else, they tried to wrap them up. Mm-hmm. So it was a very different environment, and I ended up going there 86 through 88. I mean, yeah.
I think 84 is when they blocked.
Right, and I was out of Honduras. I left Honduras in March of 84.
Right, so they legally shut down the program, packed everything up, and didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, they a lot of the guys stayed there, but the main thing that they shut down was the supply, and you know, any war without logistics is not going to exist. Right. So that's where the Ollie North and the NSC kicking in a separate mechanism to gain the funds that they needed to start, maintain these individuals.
Now, did that touch you? Like you were in the age?
Yeah, it did. But by happenstance, I was in Costa Rica. Joe Fernandez was my boss, but he was the chief of station, very dear friend, and he was involved with Ollie North. He was part of that. He was one of the few guys that was witting of what was going on. But my headquarters knew what was going on. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So when all this happened, eventually I got called in. I was in front of that grand jury. Again, as a GS-11, I'm in front of a grand jury. But the beauty was, first, I wasn't the subject of any investigation. I was there as a witness. Mm-hmm. And second, I could tell the stories firsthand that goes against all the BS that was out there, you know. Well, Felipe's dad was a Castro revolutionary who, when he realized that it was communism, he defected and eventually came to the United States and started working against the Cubans. He was captured and he was assassinated. And Felipe was a pretty young kid. Mm-hmm. And that really, really affected him. So he had this fervor for right and wrong in the sense of political freedoms and this kind of stuff. So when the Costa Rica thing kicked in, I had lost touch with him. I mean, by then, obviously, I had gone to the agency. I hadn't seen Felipe in years. Mm-hmm. And a guy from the station called me up and he said, I'm talking to this guy here. And he sounds like you. Just you guys grew up at the same time, the same area. He talks about, and the guy knew me very well. And I said, what's his name? He said, Felipe Vidal. I said, get him, hire him. Little did he know that, 6 months later, not even, I was going to go, I went down there and started running the Southern Front. So, yeah, I mean, they're all the growing pains of any operation. I mean, the old, no plan survives the first gunshot, It's a good idea. That's what we're supposed to do. It's called covert action. That's what the agency was created. The first thing they teach you at the farm is we don't do politics, we don't do policy, we steal secrets and do, black ops. That's it. That's the and we have a joking saying that if it was easy, State Department would do it. So we always end up with these jobs that are maybe illegal in the eyes of an international community, but one of the myths that I love always busting is that rogue reputation that the agency has. Mm-hmm. From Bay of Pigs and before and after, somebody in the White House knew exactly because they're the ones that gave us the Title 50 authorities to go out and do ABC. So,
do you think the ranch operation was designed to be burnt? or sort of?
No, I think it was just rudimentary. It was faced with so many challenges because, again, we're in Honduras. I had an ID that said I was a Honduran major. You know, in Costa Rica, our guys were hiding. We literally, with Felipe, we came up with an idea because they were busting our guys at the safe houses, and we couldn't afford to be captured. So we actually bought a van, air conditioned. We had a crash car, and the crash car would pick up the mosquitoes, do a surveillance detection route, meet up with us, put them in the van, and we had rolling meetings because that was the only way we were safe. So it was going from a full-out guerrilla war in the north. Now I'm doing a light version of the resistance, and during World War II with the French, because it was all under their nose. It wasn't. I didn't find out about that until way later. So and I was his boss. I was his handler. That wasn't. That was no. It's just look. Felipe's got that persona. Yeah. That even a lot of the Nicaraguan leaders did not have. He's an extremely charming individual. He's extremely smart. When you look at him, you know that he's a tough kid. There ain't no BSing him. So he projects well, and so it was kind of like, when you talk to him, yeah, he loved it. Well, I don't remember if it's a chicken and the egg thing. Felipe was there for quite a while before he started working with us directly. Supporting us. So I don't remember any. Definitely during my time, I never said to him, "Hey, go talk to Martha Honey," or what was the other guy's name, Abergon or something like that.
Joe Abergon.
Yeah, Abergon. Yeah. I didn't hear about them until it became an issue that they started writing stuff and it implicated him. So no, that wasn't directed. That wasn't what we cared about. The only thing we cared about was not getting caught, because we had to use maritime and air exfiltration out of Costa Rica to get these Contras to the training areas in Honduras. On the Honduran side, it was carte blanche. Over here, we had to smuggle these guys out in black flights and maritime operations. No, as a matter of fact, Pastora was a poster child for what we were trying to do, because you could badmouth the northern part of the alliance there of what was the FDN, because there were some of their leaders were former Somocistas. They were not criminals, but they were former Somocistas. Well, Pastora didn't have that taint. He was a Sandinista that had gotten tired of communism, and he started that Southern Front with his guys. So for us, we wanted to nurture that. We wanted to nurture the Southern Front. Yes. But politically, it would have been extremely stupid politically if we would have had the Southern Front come under the FDN, because they would now have the same taint. No, like I said, it was a nice political move to groom him and give him some of the resources. He never made much of a difference, although he did have a handful of commanders. But Felipe Vidal fought inside.
That's what I heard.
He did very well. Again, he's a tough kid, and we call him Flaco. Flaco is the commander that he was with was a guy named Ganso, and Ganso was the Mike Lima, who was a legend in the north of the south. He was a very simple guy, very tough, great leader, and had a great following. He had probably the largest contingent of all the commanders in the south. He was one of them, and Felipe did work with him. I know that they did one ambush. This before he came on board with us. He was in there, and they did a riverine ambush using RPG-7s and took out some. So he was part of that, got in those kind of firefights.
Now, was he working for you at the time, or was he just doing?
No, this was before. This was before he came. Not only for me, but for us. He was not in the agency's books then.
Right.
He was actually literally in the jungle.
So
when he saw me, he just kind of like went. I said, "Look, I knew that I was coming. I knew you were here, but I had no way of telling you." And obviously, it's such an easy transition, because the guy who was handling him before didn't know anything about Felipe or what he could do. So he had him in a very small box. Well, I know that this guy, no matter what I put him to do, he was going to do it right. And so he became my primary guy for a lot of the stuff that I was doing there. But it was a great reunion. He adored my family. He used to come by the house all the time and play with my oldest kid. And yeah.
So that's where your friendship was renewed or reformed.
Renewed, yeah. And it goes to this day. I haven't seen him in several years, but we stay in touch, and I do consider him. Well, you got to realize he's my oldest friend.
Wow.
All the other ones have fallen through the wayside. So, I don't remember the story. I remember hearing first from Felipe, the fact that he had been, accused of this, and he told me where he was at exactly and when all this other stuff went. I think it ended up being somebody that was infiltrated as a reporter.
Yeah.
That
he looks just like Vidal.
Is that right? Yeah. That's probably where the connection came.
He was an Argentinian guy.
Argentine. Yeah, he was definitely an Argentine. I recall that.
A Sandinista plot.
Yeah. But the thing is, Flaco liked Pastora. Because, as you yourself mentioned, they were both these global revolutionaries. Right. So Spadafora from the Panama area was another part of that trilogy. They were all friends.
Sure.
No, I mean in Costa Rica, I was there under embassy cover. I was there as a State Department officer.
So you were a mailboy in the.
Yep. Yeah, I had I had a cover job in the. With the embassy. Well, I mean, let's look at the facts, not my opinion. We drove the Sandinistas to the negotiating table because the Contras were kicking the crap out of them, right. Thanks to us, collectively. And I don't mean just CIA, but the U.S. government writ large, NSC or whatever. So you have, since the failures of Vietnam, you have a black op that actually produced the results that we wanted. We drove the Sandinistas to have real elections, monitored elections, and they lost. So for 4 years, we were on the scoreboard. After Costa Rica, I had another tour, South America, and I did 2 years there, and then I went to the Philippines. So I was bouncing around. Yeah. I was at the farm in 1985 as a student going through our, clandestine operations course.
To be an officer.
That's correct. To be a case officer.
And you were transitioning from a contractor to an officer?
I was brought in, like I said, initially as a contractor, but when the Contra program began, that was the only question I asked them. They called me and said, we have a job for you. I said, I only have one question. Is it full-time or part-time? Because if it was part-time, I wasn't going to do it. They said, no, this is full-time, getting into staff, and that's the way it went. Okay. The 1990s when I went to the Philippines, like I said, the tour before that was my first counterterrorism tour. I was there from 88 to 90. And then 90, I went to the Philippines through 92. And this was just 9 months or so after Colonel Nick Rowe was assassinated on the streets of Manila. And literally weeks before they had killed 2 Air Force airmen. I think one was an officer, the other was an airman, up in Angeles City there in Clark Air Force Base. Right. So the MPA was literally in town. They were very active, and that was the reason we were there, trying to help the Filipinos cope with. So I went there as a liaison guy, and I dealt with the constabulary, the Navy, and Army Intel. Yeah, I mean, we were definitely making a difference, and as a matter of fact, that was part of the issue because, let's face it, you don't go. What you go is after the source. The bad guys are smart enough to know that if you have gringos helping these guys, or these guys are kicking the crap out of us, well, we're not going to kill all these guys. Well, let's go try to get the gringos. So there were several incidents that we had. Our chief of station who had full body, bodyguard detail attached to him because we knew from intercepts and everything else that they were after us. They wanted to neutralize us so we would leave. And my turn came, I think it was in Davao. I was working with the Army guys, the Special Force unit there, 2 officers. And what we had a lot of human that we were teaching them what to do, but we were also providing technology for comms intercept, because that's how you listen to the bad guys, as you know. And we had gone to a restaurant / bar after a long day, 12-hour day of work. And there was 6 of us. It was the 2 officers, 2 of our techs, and me, and one of my best friends, David Knowlton. And we came out of this place, and Davis and I were the last 2 guys out. And as soon as I come and look to my left, awareness beats faster every time. There's these 3 guys. Now, let me back off. The Sparrows are the ones that do these assassinations, and their modus operandi. And by the way, if you Google MPA Sparrows, they have a beautiful video. They carry a 1911 Colt 45 in their groin. They hold it with their left pocket, and they just pop it out, shoot you, put it away, and leave. So these 3 guys are talking, and when we come out, they get 3 abreast, and they start walking this way, and the 2 guys on the outside have their left hands in their pocket. FBI calls that a clip. So I drew my weapon, and Davis drew his weapon. Now, if I all of a sudden reached over here and I point a gun at you, you're going to have a reaction. You go like, hey, whoa, what the hell? These guys didn't even blink. They just gave me a nod like, okay, we'll get you next time. So, yeah, good teaching point. Yeah, I mean, I was shot at during the Contra stuff because we were, the camps were right on the border and we came under attack all the time. Helicopter taking rounds, that happened several times. They'd be shooting at our helicopters. But this was an urban environment, albeit it wasn't Paris. It's still a pretty rough town, but it was civilian, yeah.
But you learn to stay on your toes, right?
Oh yeah, well you have to. Like I said, awareness beats fast draw. But I was under embassy cover, but it was notional because I was declared to the local service because I was working with the local service, so they knew my true name. As a matter of fact, they were very protective of us. They were very good about keeping tabs on where our families were and all that other stuff, because they wanted to make sure that we survived the fight.
So, did you enjoy your time in the Philippines?
I loved it. It was again that cultural change that I hungered for, because again that country that I went to afterwards, Spanish speaking, so the Philippines was the first time that I was in a place where the culture is different and everything else. It was quite a place. And we know we were making a difference. We were fighting some very bad guys.
Did you go down south at all? Or?
Yeah, I visited every area except the northern part of the Philippines. Mindanao, Cagayan de Oro, Iloilo, you name it. I've been to all those places because all those places we had either maritime or army SIGINT capabilities and source recruitment and handling kind of stuff.
So do you have a tour when you work there? Do they set you up for like a year or 2 years?
The agency usually does 2 2-year tours, and you can get extension to a 3rd year. They try not to keep us too much longer because, let's face it, after a while, I don't care how good your tradecraft is, you start becoming a suspect of something. So that's when the turnovers happen. After the Philippines, I came back to headquarters, and they asked me to go to a place that I cannot mention, and I don't know why, because in Asia, and which was my dream place because of my martial arts background. And I studied that language for 14 months, kanji-based language. And
work, though, huh?
yeah, it was. And I got a 2 level in 14 months, which was pretty good. Yeah. And then the chief of station in Seoul, Korea asked for me by name. And so I get called into headquarters, and the chief of the division says, look, I don't expect you to say yes, but when a chief of station asks something, I'm going to ask. He wants you to go over there for a special program. Joe Fernandez asked for me by name because he knew me from the Contra days when I was working in the North.
Yeah, but that's your homies,
Yeah, well, yeah, but still, here was very similar. I mean, I was home based in East Asia Division by that time, and I mean that was a solid assignment. I was going as chief of liaison of the one country, and the tipping point for it was I asked the chief. I said, "Can you tell me about this program?" He goes, "No." I said, I'll take it. The agency is very paper heavy. It doesn't exist unless you've done it. There's a lot of emphasis in writing skills and writing accurately. And most importantly, integrity and truthfulness. Because let's face it, you're a solo. And whatever you put on that paper, if you enhance it or or make it up, it's a major thing, and there's no way of checking. So we.
Does this jibe with your James Bond books at this point?
Of course not. Of course not. No, I mean, I did carry a gun, and I did drive my car, and I did have a lot of good training afterwards. But no, you never see James Bond doing paperwork or embassy cover or anything else, And I'm still waiting for my Aston Martin, by the way. So. Yeah, I did 24 years. So after Korea, after Seoul, Korea, which I came out in '95, I went back and took over the Palestinian branch. But shortly thereafter, they asked me to be the deputy chief of station for idyllic station, which was the task force targeting Osama bin Laden.
So now this is the real deal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, in 1995, just give me a snapshot of what bin Laden was, what your goal was, and what you were trying to do.
Well, we had tabs on bin Laden from before. Our mutual friend Billy Waugh did a lot of the early lifting in the early 90s, heavy lifting in the early 90s. But we knew from everything between SIGINT, overhead, sources, unilaterals, liaison sources, that what he was doing was building these camps with some very radical guys, and they were training in terrorist tactics. And at the time that he was in Khartoum, he was in what we call the white. He was totally unthreatened. He knew that he was in front.
He was a businessman.
And the thing is, he was, first of all, that was a very corrupt place anyway. And Bashiri and his cronies, literally, it was a terrorist hotel. If you could pay big money, they will live there. You're protected.
Right.
Carlos the Jackal, which our mutual friend was able to pick up. So he was in Khartoum. He was very accessible. We could have kidnapped him. We could have killed him, and we kept proposing that. But the current administration never had the fortitude to neutralize it. I was the senior ops officer. Mike Scheuer was the chief. He was the chief of station, but he's an analyst. So I was the deputy chief of station and senior ops officer. We had another ops officer who was a native Arabic speaker, who was really helpful, very, very great guy. So I did a lot of traveling, but mainly working with liaison against that target, going to the different countries, briefing them what we were trying to do and recruit their support. When 9/11 happened, I was chief of operations at our counterterrorist center. Right. So it was definitely my bailiwick. I'm the guy that called Hank Crumpton back from Australia, because he was my predecessor in that job, to run the SO portion of the war.
Well, let me get this straight. So Alex Station was 1995.
Yeah, late 95, early 96. Yeah.
And that was the transition point when he moved to Jalalabad, right?
Yeah, after probably 97-ish, 98 maybe.
So I think interviews with ABC, BBC, CNN, right. Started writing letters. In 97, he said, I'm declaring war. Were you part of Alex Station then?
No. I did a little over a year in Alex Station, and then we had a family medical issue that I had to pull out of that kind of pace.
So bin Laden was making it real easy if somebody was.
I equate it to, imagine if we would have been able to shoot Hitler in 1938. Right. We would have changed the world, and if we would have been, and that was one of the things that derailed Mike Scheuer, because he took it rightfully very personal. Right. And when the embassy bombings occurred, he told the 7th floor, he says, "You tell the administration that the blood of our Americans is in your hands." Right. And stronger message to follow, kind of stuff. I was blessed because that same chief of station that called me into Korea became the division chief later on, and he brought me in and he made me chief of the Koreas. Right. That's where I made senior grade. That's our flank rank. So from 98 to 2000, I ran our Koreas program, and I had already served in Korea 2 years, so I knew the players, I knew the operations, and there's a couple examples in the book where I actually compromised North Korean agents in Latin America, went out there and befriended them and set them up for bust and that kind of stuff. So I always try to keep my finger on the operational side. When I finished in 2000 is when Hank Crumpton came to me and said, "We want you to be chief of international terrorism for a year, and then you replace me as chief of ops for the center." For a guy like me, to be the chief of operations of our CIA's counterterrorist center doesn't get much sexier than that.
But you're
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you figure we still were following the Greek 17 November guys. We were doing obviously a PLO, and the not the international terrorism things, but like the Philippines and certain places in Latin America that were having serious terrorist problems. We were supporting.
So how do you prioritize?
It's hard, but the agency has every year we receive directional operational orders, ODs, operational directives, and they kind of tell you, what it is, the number one terrorism, then under that subtopic, Bin Laden, Hezbollah or so. But you never take the eye off the ball of everybody else. You might not have the same intensity. But that's a myth. We never took our eyes off the Chinese. We never took our eyes off the Soviets, and we did not take our eyes off of some of the lesser or smaller terrorist groups. We always had people following them, both analytically and operationally. It's a black hole. People judge the agency by the movies. In the movies, the intelligence service know everything. And what people don't realize, intelligence is literally a puzzle. With a lot of missing pieces, and you're trying to guess where the next one goes and what's the big picture. So it is frustrating because that's the expectation is, well, why didn't you fix it? Well, imagine a guy like Bin Laden who's been out there with these guys, his cronies, for so many years. Unless one of those cronies turns bad and we could recruit them, you're not going to take a Ric Prado and teach him Arabic and go out there, say salam alaikum, and join Al Qaeda.
But yeah, you were the guy in the camps training the insurgents, right?
Yeah, that was different.
But I'm just saying that's a capability.
Oh yeah, without, and we use them where we can. I mean, our goal is always to infiltrate these things. Yeah. But the majority of our successes penetrating organizations is recruiting somebody who is at least in the periphery of that organization, and then we help them swim up the ladder. Right. And swim up the stream and get better and better information for it. I was in all these meetings. It was Cofer Black and of course Hank Crumpton and myself. We were the three principals at the time for that. So yeah, all that stuff was being formulated. We had a huge injection for both Delta and SEAL Team 6 that were assigned to us to help us understand capabilities besides our ground branch guys. And so yeah, it was very, very dynamic, and there was a lot of aggressive actions going on. Yeah, well Gary Schroen became the first team leader, and then literally the leader of the first boots on the ground in Afghanistan. And they're the ones that vector in, the Green Beret triple nickel guys. So Gary had worked the out account, and he spoke the language, and he had association with the Northern Alliance. Masood, who was their leader, was a very charismatic guy and an incredible military tactician. I mean, he really knew how to fight, and he was not a Taliban kind of guy. They were deathly enemies, and that is the reason that Bin Laden had him killed 2 days before 9/11, because they knew that we were going to go back at him, and that this was a belly button that we would hook up into. So our guys went out there, one of them a classmate of mine, JR, and a couple of other guys, and they were the ones that established their relationship with the Northern Alliance. Literally, I think it was $3 million that they had in their bags to be able to get the warlords to start doing their bidding, because as you know over there, everything is tribal, and everything is money talks and bullshit walks in their books. So, but those were our guys on the ground, and then when but even then we were doing targeting and all that other stuff. When the SF guys came in, they brought in the lasing capabilities, and we were started vectoring in all our resources.
So would you say everything worked almost perfectly?
It really did. Yeah. Other than capturing Bin Laden, which of course was part of the equation and was the one that we didn't succeed at until many years later. But the actual takedown of the Taliban and squirting Al Qaeda into a hole, that was very successful.
So are you in an office getting feedback from the field, like this is happening, we got this? Okay.
Yeah.
Are you telling them to do more of this, less of that, or you let it happen out?
No, first of all, Hank had OpCon, operational control of the SO, Special Operations. I was there obviously because I was one of the senior managers in CTC at the time, and there was input, there were discussions, but no, and enthusiasm wasn't lacking. I mean, everybody had like Tarzan with a knife in his mouth. Everybody just wanted to go out there and mess with the bad guys.
When you're seeing setbacks, let's say like Kali John gear, are you patched in, or are you getting them sort of secondhand, or how are you monitoring things? Or
No, you're not patched in. I mean that's a more current phenomenon now, where SEAL Team 6 will hit a place and the commander back home is watching the whole action. That's very new. We about as close as I got to that. It was, as you know, the agency is the one that developed the Predator program, and Cofer Black was again one of the best bosses I ever had, and a very dear friend. But he was the right leader at the right time there. So there was a time when I had Ben Bonk was his deputy. He was the senior analyst, and he had the duty. The Predator duty was from headquarters, and we were the ones that would say shoot or no shoot at the time. And of course, this is all forward based. And Ben got called downtown, so I ended up with the duty. And that led to the takedown. We literally neutralized a big component, about 17 guys of the Taliban. That was the one time that I had vision in what I was doing, and did the push the button part and get the guy to blow it. But no, that other stuff, we don't do that. Not back then. Yeah, I was the chief of ops. I started in May of 2001. And in 2002, I walked to Cofer and I said, look, we're kicking the living crap out of these guys in a war zone. But let's face it, the soft underbelly of any organization is their logistical capability. There's a lot of guys in first, second, and third world countries doing bin Laden's bidding, and those are the people that we can access. So I came up with a program which was briefed to President Cheney, and he approved it. And the concept in a Reader's Digest version of it is we would make book patterns of life on X number of terrorists from different organizations. And the concept was what we lacked come 9/11. We didn't have a disruptive capability. So my program was designed to make book on, let's say, 3 Hezbollah guys and 5 Al-Qaeda guys. And all of a sudden we start getting all these pieces on the puzzle that said something's happened. We don't know what it is yet, but there's something brewing. Then we neutralize these guys. You can compromise them, you can duct tape them, you can shoot them. And what does an organization do if all of a sudden 3 of your senior logistical guys go down? We're penetrated. And hopefully that put the brakes on and was able to.
Did you have the authorities for this?
Yes, we did.
So you had global authorities.
We had under Title 50. It all came under. That's George Bush signed after he signed the 17 September, giving us the Title 50 authorities. Yeah.
So you had gone from watching people, like Billy was watching people, Cofer was saying no, don't shoot them, to being more proactive. And was this Sudan incident probably sort of the thing that reminded everybody that had we made this decision at this time, this wouldn't have happened?
Yeah, and the program was very successful. The 2 years we were able to make book on a lot of really bad guys. But then when the actionable part came in, the testicular fortitude had elapsed quite a bit. The distance from the politics kicked in. There were other distractions. But we were successful in putting that thing together, and I'm a firm believer that it is shameful that we don't have that tool in our toolbox. The team that I had, we deployed. I was gone most of the 2.5 years I had left in the outfit, because again we were out there going to different places and trying to establish surveillance on some of these guys. But the problem is. in some of the places where they have better counterintelligence capabilities, they're watching the guys that you want to watch. So we could not send but 3 guys in there and stay 3 months looking at something. So everything was like you went in for a couple of weeks, got out, somebody else came in and followed up on what you got, and little by little you piecemeal the patterns of life on these guys without being compromised.
And who's your ideal operator for this kind of surveillance? Is he the ethnic guy, or?
No, I mean we had some ethnic diversity. We had several guys from our surveillance group that were working with us, but no, we had regular case officers, and some were Arabic speakers. The other ones were white like me, and
Was there sort of some kind of high tech involvement, sort of surveillance and?
No, I mean we did we started having the capability of tagging cars and that kind of stuff. We would park cars in front of somebody's house and have the battery capability to record for half a day or whatever it was, and then move the car. And but that was about the level of that. And of course, the SIGINT is always active, and so is the overhead stuff that.
I was thinking, like, let's say Damascus or someplace like that. Did you have black holes where you couldn't go in and find?
Oh no. That's awful. And that's, remember, that area is more of a war theater. The idea was to go after the people that are working outside the war theaters, because the military's got Title 10 authorities. They could do whatever the hell they want in these war theaters. We wanted to bring that pain. I wanted to bring that pain to these guys that are living fat, dumb, and happy in nice places, eating well and making things happen.
So to go back to Iran-Contra days or the Contra days, would this be sort of reflective of what the agency would set up to support a covert operation, like bank accounts?
Of course, yeah.
So did you have to set up a whole network of fake companies, business cards, offices?
Yep, backstopped.
That's called backstop.
There's backstop credentials in, and we had a very robust system for memorizing, what your character really is, and in depth. I mean, if somebody asked you who your father was, you knew. Were they dead? Were they buried? What school you went to? So it's quite elaborate.
So now you got the James Bond stuff happening.
Yeah.
So is this called deep cover?
Finally, it is. Yeah. I mean, we were first of all, that team, we were under non-official cover whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we had no dealings with the embassy. Right. We never got anywhere close to the embassy.
Did you have regular passports?
We had regular passports, and in many cases, this is before they went onto all the electronic stuff that we helped provide. Back then you could still have alias passports from different countries. Right. Usually third world countries where, especially if you could pull off, the Spanish or whatever. And that came very useful. But yeah, it was completely backstopped. If somebody, nowadays it's a lot harder, obviously, because there's so few secrets because of computers.
So was this something that was cooking in your head for a long time, or was it just a response to?
I always had a gift of things would pop into my head at the right time, but it was based on past experiences. I was very frustrated when I was deputy chief of the Bin Laden station because our inability to execute. And then when I come in as chief of ops at the CTC, we're hearing all the chatter, but we couldn't do anything about it. And that's what led me to put together the idea that, hey, we have to be able to, and I remember when I briefed Tenet on it, I told him, I said, sir, we cannot build the firehouse when your house is on fire. We've got to have these capabilities in our toolbox. And you figure the most powerful, country in the world with a good intelligence service, how can you not have that in your toolbox? It's not the go-to. It's the final option.
Is there a historical precedent or a name or something? Did somebody have something like this in the past?
Not that I know of.
Okay. And I know Americans would talk to, like, the CIA would debrief businessmen when they came back.
Of course, yeah. That's very robust.
They'd have, I think it's called national asset. They would have people working inside a company in, let's say, Libya or Sudan or something. Yep. But they weren't working as part of a team.
No.
So, just to be clear, so this was a part of a find, fix, and finish network, but there wasn't a lot of finish. It was logistics, observation.
Find and fix and come up with the ops plan. And like I said, the beauty of the plan was you could be looking at these guys for 3 years. But if all of a sudden they were up to something and you got wind of it, you had the ability within days to disrupt that. Because that's the model for, preempt and disrupt is the model for CTC.
Yeah.
Like I said, the testicular fortitude started going away. What happened was, and I describe one to a T in the book, that I went to brief George Tennant and Jim Pavitt, who was the DDO at the time, Director of Operations, and I had the sponsoring division chief there, a very good friend of mine, and I briefed on how we could take this guy down. And it was good. I mean, this is one of the best conceived, and it wasn't just me. I had some really bright talent. So we would sit in a room and come up with these ideas, and I'll never forget it because when I finished my briefing, Pavitt looks at the DCI and says, "Mr. Director, there's no doubt in my mind that Prado and his team not only can do this, but that they can get away with it." I'm going, high five. And then he says, "However, we have to look at the political ramifications of doing that at this time." The division chief got up, left, and he retired the next day. We did have assets. We did have assets. We handled a few of them, but the majority of those assets were handled by the station. And of course, we would get any information that we all knew who the bad guys were and where they were. Generally, we were the ones that pinpointed to. I even had the keys to a guy's car that we were looking at. We had gone to that length of capability.
So you had a network that was global. Right. You had people in your dossiers. You could centralize that and go, did so-and-so call this guy, or did you see a lot of money going through there? And the finish part, the lethal part, would be something that would be handled at a legal level or a higher level?
Well, yes and no. You got to understand that lethality was just one of the three options, because I was, again, by now I was a senior, I was an SIS too, so I kind of knew, I had got my black belt in bureaucracy, right? So I knew that I had to have options.
Yeah.
So each individual that we targeted, I demanded three scenarios. Compromise. We had a guy that we were going to put inert explosive devices in his car, taint his car with the right stuff, and then somebody calls the police and say, I brought this in for the country, and I can't send my. Okay, so he goes to jail for a year, but at least he's disrupted. The second, which is the hardest thing to do, was renditions, but we were capable of doing that. Vulgarly, we call them duct tape operations, grabbing these guys and taking them out and taking them to Guantanamo or whatever the hell it is.
Well, this was the Romania, Bulgaria, Egypt sort of menu, right? Like,
Right.
did you want this done to them, this done to them?
That's right, exactly. And then the final option of the final option was the lethality. And again, I go back to my experiences with Bin Laden. If we would have shot Bin Laden, or at least rendered him in 1996. Cole, the embassy bombings, 9/11 probably wouldn't have happened. Well, for me was that meeting with Tennant. That was the second time that I had gone up there and briefed on something that they thought was great, but let's not do it right now, kind of stuff. And this was imminent. This is a guy that we needed to disrupt because we knew what he had done and what he was continuing to do. It was very, 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 very lucrative target. My problem was this. I had pick of the litter of my team. These guys were all the bravest and brightest, all military background, but and as an example of my four operators, male operators, one made SIS-5, the others made SIS-4. So these were talented individuals that were willing to be out of the career track to be following Ric Prado doing this harebrained stuff all over the world. I couldn't keep these guys, as much we enjoyed training, rappelling upside down and shooting, blowing shit up. You can't keep that kind of talent forever. So after that meeting, I went down, Jose Rodriguez, who was my boss. He had taken over for Kofor, an old friend of mine, and to this day a great friend of mine. And I told him, I said, look, this is never going to be. We're a paper tiger. We just brief well. And what really irked me was that when I briefed the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, in front of Tenet, in front of Pavitt, and with Jose as my boss, he blessed the program. He says, this is exactly what we want the agency to be able to do. Move forward, and you tell us. And Condoleezza Rice was also in the room. And Condi said, do we brief Congress? And he said, not yet. He says, when you come back to us with a blessed plan, because we had the generalities of stuff, come back and brief me, and if we decide to go ahead with it, we'll brief the right people in the intelligence community that needed to know, and we would activate. And that spark never went back to the White House. My seventh floor would not, somebody a lot smarter than me and with better sources than me, explained to me that what happened was senior management had a view of, if Prado succeeds at this stuff, we don't get any credit because we can't. It's supposed to be a blackout. If Prado gets compromised, we're the ones that go to jail, and we're the ones that get fired. So again, that backbone was eroding, and that's when I decided to retire. Our stuff was surgical, and that was
blow people up.
No, I mean we were, let me give you an example of capabilities that developed later on. You know about Imad Mughniya. He's one of my favorite guys that I would have loved to get, and I did work against him for over a year. But he got the device was planted on the headrest of his car, and the only damage was to his brain, which were all over the windshield. So this isn't, I am not a fan, although I have used the Predator in a combat zone, but like I told you the story before, I am not a proponent of collateral damage, which feeds the recruiting that you're trying to fight. And there's no exploitation of intelligence either, so right. The surgical capability for me was all the sense in the world. Again, if I could have shot Hitler in 1938, I probably would have been a very satisfied guy. We actually had, out of the 3 plans that we had, compromise, So
you were authorized to take people out there?
Well, we could get the authorities. We had blanket authorities to target them, right. But obviously we couldn't pull the trigger until it was blessed. First by a building, and then by the administration, which is the way it's supposed to be, and the way that it is. So, but no, we had the capability to task assets to do this, and in some other places we ourselves were prepared and trained. We trained for months and months and months of this stuff.
So when you say we, what was your operational idea based on sort of SAS or Special Forces?
I think probably, again, I'm a big reader, and if you'll see, I got about 6 or 8 books on the Israel stuff. So a lot of it, I think, was a combination. The SAS, of course, did have some great operations, but this was more of a going out into a first, second, or third world country and dealing with an individual that was trying to do us harm. One of them, a very capable Navy SEAL, retired, that I knew from years back, and I brought him on board. We had 3 analysts, so it was about 6 operators, 3 analysts dedicated, one from NSA, she was great. And then what we had was some of our surveillance group capabilities. We would be able to pick the ethnically correct person for the particular thing to help us with the surveillance. But the first guy that we made a successful book on, I was on the ground when, first I said 2 of my guys went on the ground and found where he lived. And I was on the ground with 2 of our surveillance guys where we were able to film him coming out of the house with his German wife that was wearing all the Arab garb, walking behind him, of course, and him getting in the car. So that was the step. I was there for 2 weeks, got out, somebody else replaced me and the other 2 guys. So compromise was one of the options we had. Making things look like an accident, especially now with the forensics and the cameras and everything else, is very, very difficult. No, I am a firm proponent that under the right legal guidance and for the right reasons, God and country,
Right.
the 9mm 50-cent bullet in the middle of the forehead is the most surgical thing. Nobody else is going to get hurt, and you know that you have a verified target that needs taken care of. And no, I mean when I disbanded the group, now the group didn't go away. It became a briefing paper tiger. But all these guys, and like I said, they went on to be case officers and chief of stations, and they all retired as senior grade officers, which is not common to have that kind of a crop. But I did have pick of the litter.
Let me stop this and start it again, just so I feel safe. So, at what age are you walking away from this meeting? And what is your frame of mind when you leave you're meeting with Dick Cheney? These are important people.
Yeah.
You got your boss, tenant. This is your baby. This is the thing that you know will work. And it's a cool idea. I mean, it's very dynamic, very global. So you're walking out of that meeting. What do you do? What do you say?
Well, I'll be very honest with you. The first thing that crossed my mind is here you have this Cuban kid fresh off the banana boat, and I just finished briefing the Vice President of the United States,
Right.
and I cannot even tell my parents, So, but that was such an important thing to me because I believed in what we were trying to do, and I go back to the fact, Robert, that I gave up the chief of operations job in CTC to go do this, and even Kofor looked at me and go, "You're an idiot." I said, "No, this is what I do best. I'm a street guy." Yeah, the fact that I can manage, and I showed it in the Koreas, and I showed it in international terrorism and Bin Laden and everything else. Yeah, I can do that, but I like operations.
And so, how old are you at this point?
I'm in my mid-50s.
It's not bad, but it's getting towards the point where you're thinking
60 is mandatory for us unless you get waivers for operational officers, which is stupid, by the way, because a 70-year-old can still run a station better than everybody else. So.
Sure.
But 60 is mandatory, but I was probably 55, 56 or so.
So what are your options, and what do you decide to do?
Well, for one thing, I was burned out. I had been gone away from family for a little too long. And so I had met Eric Prince before because not only was I chief of ops when we had the Kabul security stuff, but when we started becoming friends was when I started training my guys at Blackwater. Because my dilemma was I had a reputation in the building. The guys that I was with, they were all meat eaters. Right? If we go to one of our black sites and we're doing this kind of training, they're going to go, we know they're up to something. So at Blackwater, everybody was doing crazy shit there. So Eric, I went to Eric and he agreed to train my guys. Nobody had ever asked us our name. Nobody would ever talk to us or everything else. So when I retired, he pitched me to come to Blackwater.
I want to be clear about this. So when Blackwater was a contractor to the CIA, he set up a special area or pass that you could use. Did he also provide you with certain types of weapons that you could train on?
Well, we had our own weapons. We actually have a very robust weapon procurement programs, and so there's not a gun that the agency doesn't already own.
So what you needed from him was the space
and the expertise, because for example, the first course that I did over there was that of a tactical sniper. So it was me and one of my guys, a former Ranger, Mogadishu vet, Purple Heart guy, and the exercise was under 200 yards because we had to be able to identify the targets and all this other stuff. So they brought in an active duty SEAL team guy to take annual leave, and he worked with us for 5 days.
So it was symbiotic. You needed certain skill sets, your guys needed to be trained, and everything worked out fine.
Well, and something dear to your heart, knife fighting. I mean, the way that I got into that whole idea was the fact that I'm deploying overseas, and the best way to do surveillance is on a motorcycle. The only weapon you're going to find if you're out there by yourself is a knife. So literally, we were trained by police, motorcycle cops, on how to spill bikes and shoot from over the thing. It was the most fun I've had with my clothes on. And then the knife fighting also developed out of that, because in many cases I was the only weapon that was realistic for us to to carry until a point where we would actually have to do something where we needed weapons. And
Well, I understand. Eric's a kindred spirit. You say, I need this, you got it.
right. Oh yeah, yeah. There was no questions asked. He did me right. He really did me. They produced everything we needed. It was always top-notch training. Especially in those years, they had creme de la creme. The guys that were working there were literally the experts in their respective fields.
Now, did you have to hire Blackwater, or because I know the agency had a contract for?
Eventually, the agency had a contract. This is before all of that.
Oh, really?
We literally would pay him
Okay.
for Joe, Mo, and Larry to
things.
do this underwater basket weaving stuff, and he knew who we were, but nobody else did. So that's the way that was happening. So once I retired, he pitched me to come to Blackwater, and I turned him down, which pissed him off.
Well, okay. So why would? Okay, what year was that?
You're talking 2004.
So it was a good times.
Yeah.
He was on the rise.
No. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's when he was.
State Department.
Right.
He'd done some agency stuff, but he wasn't like the king of all.
No. That was the beginning of the big curve. I was there for the going to the zenith. But what happened was I was burned out, and I owed it to my wife and my kids too. So I went to work for MITRE Corporation I was the only DO officer there. Where the joke was there was a sign, "Don't feed the knuckle dragger," or whatever it is, because they're all scientists and shit. And it was very low key. I would drive in, start work at 8, 5 o'clock, I'm gone. I don't have to worry about people calling me at 3 o'clock in the morning that something blew up. It was a good decompression. So Eric invited us to a Gold Cup steeplechase thing in Virginia. And when he came by our table to say hello, Carmen looks at him, grabs him by the arm, very, very un-Carmen, because she's a shy girl. She looks at him and says, "Please hire him. He's driving me nuts." So Eric goes, "Really?" So the next week we met, and that's when I went to work for Blackwater. And his pitch was to resuscitate some of these capabilities and be able to provide them back to the in our case, we would have the authorities because we would be tasked by U.S. government approved components to say, go do this or go do that.
Were you going outside to come back inside, or what was your status? You retired.
I'm retired. I'm fully retired.
You just used up whatever government plan.
Yep.
Now I have a gun. I'm going to go to the Philippines and I'm going to shoot this guy or track him.
No. That wasn't the way it was. I mean, we had government sponsors, and the government.
What form?
Well, I can't go into too many details, but some of it was agency, other was our special military.
So you plugged into the government.
Right. Oh yeah. At least under my programs. Now I've heard a lot of stuff after the fact. About teams doing this, that, and the other. I cannot vouch or disavow any of that. Right. But for us, we were working under direct supervision of senior government officials.
Contract manager. You had all your.
Oh, we had all that crap that was in there. So they knew, and we accounted for everything that we did. And we had some really good successes too. I mean, as far as getting stuff they wanted us to get. But no, it was that was all on the up and up. And Eric has gotten a bad rap, or has earned a bad rap of late. But I would tell you, at that time, I would have taken a bullet for him.
And he was playing by the rules.
He was playing by the rules, and he was a believer. When it's funny, when he pitched me, he says, "Look, I'm making so much money that I don't know what to do with." I said, "I want you to be my conscience, my God and country guy, because I know you were doing some sexy shit. That's the stuff that we want." That to me clinched the deal, because and I will tell you the years that I worked with him there were some of the best years of my life, because I really had a good crew. A lot of the usual suspect from before I had taken over, or they retired to.
In the clandestine world.
Yeah, it is. But I want to make a clarification that the contracts that we had the first 2 or 3 years there were not for profit. It was expenses only. Right. They would reimburse us because Eric wanted to do the God and Country stuff.
Yeah. Would it be proof of concept, let's say?
It was some of it was proof of concept. That's the way it started. He actually funded some of the stuff that I was able to put together, and then I went to the right individuals who I happen to know in the community and say, I can do this.
And were there people inside our government that were really hard pressed to get assets and information on
Oh yeah,
certain people?
oh yeah. And everything was tasking. You know, the big difference between what we did in the agency and what we were trying to do at Blackwater, we had tried to do the same capabilities, but also asset development, developing assets in Southeast Asia, Latin America. This is where, again, guess who was working with me in that was Felipe Vidal.
Yeah. Now, so this is what's fascinating. So you had essentially set up a private, I won't call it find, fix, and finish. Was there a name for it? Did it have some fancy name? Operation? Okay. And you hired the best of the best. You took the most experienced guys, and it was for hire. It's just your limitations were that you worked for the government and you did a contract. And was there anybody sniffing around going, "What the hell are you people doing?"
Well, the folks that we worked for had oversight. I mean, they had a chain of command, you know. So yeah, my counterpart for a military part of this was a colonel kind of guy, but he had his boss and his boss's boss behind him. So we derived the tasking from them, and then the authorities. And like I said, a lot of what we were doing was building infrastructures of recruiting people that we knew, people that we would meet, and develop capabilities to where now, if the government came up and said, we need to take this house down, we say, we have 3 people in that country that can go and do that.
Exactly what he does.
Yeah, I don't think reaching out is the right thing, because we were all, by then we were always close and we were in a lot of contact. But yeah, he was thrilled. He was thrilled, and
what was his skill set?
You know, first of all, I think that the skill set that the Max and I had, or Felipe and I had, was that we were street kids. We knew we were not, you know, the kind of guy that just goes to school. I mean, we were street kids. We kind of knew the savvy. We knew how to make friends. We knew how to deal with enemies, that kind of stuff. And he was very capable of that. We trained him. You know, I personally brought people in to train him in communications, photography, all that other stuff. And he was an excellent student because he had that street savvy and a very strong set of willpower to go out there and do this stuff. So yeah, he was instrumental in a lot of my stuff.
So he's in his 50s. Are you paying him a salary? And he's
Yeah.
So this is
all my guys were paid. You're getting paid. He was, yeah.
So this sounds like a great movie idea, doesn't it? It's like. So
I hope so.
What year is this, just so we're clear?
We're talking 2004, 2005 through. I did this through 2008. I think it was. The last 2 years were not with Blackwater.
Right.
Because what happened was Blackwater started getting hot in 2006 and 2007. And the sponsors came to me and said, you got to leave Blackwater. And I said,
it's political too.
Exactly. No, it was all political. And I said, no, it ain't happening. I mean, you know, he brought me to the dance. I'll close this shit down.
Yeah.
And they backdoor went to Eric directly, and Eric came over and said, here's your severance. Here's a name for a company. You take the programs, they're yours. I had a nice severance pay out of it. Like I said, Eric was always very generous with all of us. And I ran those operations out of my own little company until I started getting hot, primarily by some of the ebooks that some idiots write. And then they asked me they bought me out. They literally bought my little company out.
Who's they? The people you work with?
USG, yeah.
All right, so
all these 3-letter things that are out there.
I don't want to skip over Comfort Black and we're all right there.
Not.
So you come out of the agency, you're frustrated. You're like, this guy opens the door for you. You hear angels singing. You're like, I'm doing this. Is great. You bring in your pals. It's like a tight team with a great mission. You're not a full operational. It's proof of concept.
Right. At first it was, yeah.
You're not running around shooting people.
No, it was big.
But you're building logistics. You're building safe houses. Local
Recruitment, assets, yeah.
And this is all coming out of Eric's pocket.
Yep.
Is Eric part of this? Does he play James Bond?
He got to play a little. He did the motorcycle course with us.
Yeah.
He did the knife fighting course. Bob Casper was, as you know, a legendary knife guy, was our instructor, and we had the scars to prove it. So he loved that, and I would take him on surveillance practices and stuff like that,
Okay.
because hey, A, he's my boss.
Yeah.
B, he's cleared, and that was part of his quid pro quo. He really enjoyed that stuff.
But did he ever go on
No.
target?
No.
It's too
No.
iffy, right?
No, and his profile was rising at meteoric rise.
But he was in this mode where you can't take my picture,
For a while.
Okay, so
Kofor and Rob.
So I get this straight. So Eric did work for the agency in the period you talked about, but he worked for many things. He did many things, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things he did is he brought in Kofor, he brought in Rob Reicher.
I brought in Kofor.
Sorry, you brought in Kofor, and did Rob Reicher come over because you?
I also brought him. What happened with Kofor was that I walked into the office, and Eric and Gary were having a conversation, and when I walked in, he says, "Rick, here's what we're talking about. We decided that we need a persona, that can come in and be our talking head, not just a bunch of SEAL team guys, but somebody, he says, like somebody like Kofor Black." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, do you want somebody like Kofor Black, or do you want Kofor Black?" So I recruited Kofor Black to come in, and, because again, I'd follow that guy to hell and back for anything, even today.
So.
Well, but by then, retirement was starting to look good. I've been bouncing hard. I had a great career at the agency. Mm-hmm. I had a great time at Blackwater. Once I was no longer a viable interlocutor because the heat that was starting to spill on me from other things, mm-hmm. We decided to move from the Virginia area, and for about 7 years I taught at Fort Bragg. Mm-hmm. A course that's called Advanced Special Operations and Techniques, and I can't tell you what that means, but
I should tell.
And I did that. I played,
right.
Representative.
But you're giving back to the community.
I did that until the book. I stayed involved after 7 years of teaching this course. I go up there 8 times a year. Got old. Going up there, and I started a special training thing called Camp X, mm-hmm. with a guy that was teaching a course called Lone Operator, mm-hmm. and which I had attended and loved it, and we kind of hit it off, and we created this, and primarily we were teaching SOF, or Special Operations Forces, mm-hmm. how to work in a non-war environment. Yeah. So everything was concealed carry. Everything was, being able to live your cover for action. All that kind of stuff. So I did that for fun.
This is for fun, right? This is.
No, I was getting paid. I mean,
were you teaching SEALs and?
Yeah. It was. We had SEAL team guys. We did several SEAL team guys. Mm-hmm. We did Green Berets. We did AFSOC. Mm-hmm. They were a big client because there was we. The biggest problem that the agency has is that I have a belief that you cannot run special military or special intelligence operations through a political optic. Mm-hmm. And when you put in a DCI who has, unlike me, has never sat in a dark corner with a recruited terrorist, mm-hmm. how does he value? Mm-hmm. When he gets that piece of intelligence that Prado met with a terrorist and blah, 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 and this is what they're going to be doing, and, how does he empathize with what that does to my family, the risks that I'm taking? Mm-hmm. They don't understand. So it's a two-way thing. First of all, we don't respect them because they're not one of us. Mm-hmm. And they don't understand us. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, they have a political position, and that's who they cater to. Right. Rather than taking care of, and a perfect example, going back to Kofor. You don't think Kofor would have been a fantastic DCI? Mm-hmm. I would go back in the building if Kofor. No, by that time, I had my nest egg, was having grandkids, mm-hmm. And again, God, country, family. There comes a time when you have to flip a little bit of that.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, and the thing was, with all due modesty, I set out to pay this country my debt of honor for taking me and my family in.
Right.
And I think that I accomplished that fairly well. No, my understanding of the process by the lawyers that did the investigation on my behalf, because I did, try to get a lawyer, and they told me don't rebuttal him, do not even engage him, because I just makes him sell books. And as you know, the thing I think sold like 20 ebooks or some crap, but because it was garbage. What happened with him was there was a guy who had been busted for narcotics. He was a major narcotics trafficker in Miami, who was associated with some of the people that I grew up with.
Is this Luton specifically, or just a group of guys? Is it that group, that the Miami Kings or whatever you call them, or is this Luton?
I have no idea. No, this was out of my. But what happened was this guy gets busted. He's in jail,
Right.
and he develops cancer.
Right.
So he reaches out and says, I can do a tell-all if you give me X amount of money so I can leave with my wife, because I know that I'm going to die in jail. And this guy, first of all, he started fabricating stuff.
Right.
And the author of the book made it even, sexier, and, started cobbling together things that were hearsay or whatever, but there was nothing there.
Did he present you with evidence and ask you to refute it? Or?
He never. I found out about it after the fact.
Really?
After the fact.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, other people that were in the book were also taken by surprise that this came out.
So as of yesterday, he's on Twitter talking shit. Anyway, okay.
I think that's what he's known for the most, yeah.
So the other thing is that Eric also had a book written about him, despite all his secrecy or whatever. It was called Blackwater by Jeremy Scahill. And this book basically positioned him as a right-wing political zealot with an army of mercenaries. And this is not the correct terminology, but that's what it was labeled as. And a lot of people, and he says that, well, they burned him down because he was a symbol of what people didn't like about the war in Iraq. So you had the CIA being the heroes in Afghanistan, and then you had Blackwater being the bad guys in Iraq. And, we talked yesterday about role models and dreaming and wanting to do something. And is there anything left in government law enforcement that people yearn to be, or has it all been burned down?
No, I mean, I think the infrastructures are still there. It was funny, when I first started in the agency, there was a joke about every time that something we couldn't do it or whatever, said, this is going to go to the agency in the basement. That was the joke. Like, there's got to be, we said, we can't be this handicapped. There's got to be somebody else out there that is doing this other stuff. So you got a State Department that does it easy. We do the hard stuff. These guys do the impossible stuff.
The dirty stuff.
Yeah. So yeah.
But that doesn't exist.
Not really. Like I said, I tried to add a little teeth to things where I could.
But you created something that actually is James Bond. It's better than James Bond, right? I mean, it's.
I would like to think so.
It's a global. So okay, so let's talk about politics a bit, because when we had the January 6th event, there was a reaction from the Special Forces community about insurgents, maybe a bit strong, but radical right-wing elements inside Special Forces. And that there was this movement inside the government in which people were clustering around the idea that we need to have change and some secret whatever. Now, do you believe that there is that kind of movement inside?
No, look, I think the biggest insult that the government has done is, first of all, malign our own military. We have. Are there people in the military that don't like the administration and talk a lot of crap? Yeah. Are they people out of those that are not talking crap that would do something? Sure. I'm sure that they're out there because they have the skill set and they've sacrificed life and limb for God and country, and they're just not going to lay down. Okay. But it became very politically convenient to say that the biggest threat to the United States is our internal terrorism. Right. Are you kidding me? Right. You know, you have Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, Hezbollah, Al Qaeda, ISIS, and we're worried about, you know, let's say 1,000 guys in all of the United States that would be plotting to shoot the president or take over. It's just
So grumpy SF guys that I know are exactly like you. You know, they've been there, done that, they've carried a lot of weight, and they're just kind of grumpy about politics, but they don't have any idea at all about doing something against the government or the country or the Constitution. So what I'm seeing is...
And I'm one of those, definitely.
Yeah,
I would never fire the first shot. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything to defend. I think the outside disinformation campaign of creating separation makes people afraid of the others, right?
That's the intent.
It's not there, and you know, you've been inside all those wars where you create propaganda, you get people fired up against something, but it's usually to create a better thing, right?
Yeah.
Rarely do people just go at it, you know, just because they don't agree. So let's just finish up by talking about Felipe, because he is what you could have, but you were anchored to something. And he wasn't anchored to something. And what was it that you were anchored to, and that what he wasn't anchored to?
This country. You know, Felipe he loved the United States, don't get me wrong. He would never do the United States wrong. But he had a very international, his days with Hugo Spadafora and Comandante Cero and all these, he had this vision of bigger than just what I didn't have that. Mm-hmm. I was a young guy who felt that this country had taken me and my family in, and I wanted to make a contribution, and I had the brains and the brass to do so, and I did. So my grounding is my loyalty to this country.
Right, and you stayed within the that we haven't talked about.
No, the thing that I would reiterate is that I wrote Black Ops with the purpose of giving my beloved agency not a positive image, but a realistic image. Mm-hmm. And I've been told by the critics that it accomplished that. It is a New York Times bestseller, as you know. My goal was to put in the hands of your grandson a book that he could say, oh, wow, so this is what CIA is really about. No, it's not. You're not going to get an Austin Martin, and yes, you have to do after action reports, but there's a lot of sexy stuff that we were able to do in the agency collectively, not just me. I mean, there's 1,000 Rics inside the CIA, in mixed bags of, you know, paramilitary and not paramilitary and everything else. But I think that's the drum that I will always beat is our agency does not lack oversight. Our agency does not do rogue stuff. Yes, I know they're in the 50s or something. There were growing pains. I wasn't there. I was a Cuban, so I had nothing to do with that. But, you know, I felt so betrayed by the media because we have 140 some stars on our wall. And we're, as you said yourself, we're a tiny, especially the director of operations is one of the smallest of the directorates. And to have 140 some stars on the wall, and almost a third of those were post 9/11. And a lot of those men and women, Jennifer Matthews worked for me in the Bin Laden station. She was one of our original analysts. And Mike Spann, I didn't know him well, but I had met him in the gym a couple of times, and I knew he was great. I was a former ground branch guy, and so was he. So for me, I wanted to have something that Mike Spann's wife could go to the kids when they're 13 years old and say, this is the kind of stuff your dad was doing at CIA.